Hello, Cosmic Witches. Welcome back to another episode of the Divine Gossip Girls with your hosts, me, Maggie, Sophie, and Carly. And today, cozy up, grab yourself a cup of steaming hot tea because we are going to get a little real with you. It's going to be a little different, I feel, than our other episodes. Maybe we're really embodying Gossip Girls a little bit with this episode today, but we wanted to, break down the walls and just not really gatekeep. I mean, I was going to say anymore, not that we ever gatekeep, but I feel like in the spiritual community, there's a lot of gatekeeping, there's a lot of fear mongering, and there's just sometimes some shady stuff going on because unfortunately, we are not all light beings here on the earth just vibing and eating cherries and swimming in the ocean. We are complex humans, and sometimes with that comes a bit of a darker side. So today we wanted to talk about the dark side of the spiritual community, whether that be the idea of cults, twin flames, the coaching industry, and what we don't personally like about it with that self-development spiritual side, as well as just dark energy, dark entities, and dark beliefs, and the fear mongering that comes along with spirituality to try and convince people that they're doing something wrong or they need to follow a certain way of being, of doing, of feeling. And we're just not about that because spirituality is an individual experience. It's how it differs from religion. Religion is following, a certain sort of rules. It's following a higher power as this higher power, guiding light, omnipotent being, something that is grander than all of us and we should worship, whereas spirituality is a personal journey and figuring out your own beliefs and your own ideas about the world. And so within that spiritual sphere, if someone's trying to tell you exactly what and how to do things and that they are the end all be all and everything they say is right, that's just not what spirituality is about. You're supposed to be able to take and leave what you personally agree with. It's a very personal experience, and we're just sort of all figuring it out together. So we wanted to open the space, talk about some things we personally don't believe in, and talk about some just concerning things that we've seen. So yeah, let's just get into it. And we're really going off the intro here and spilling the spiritual tea. Hey, Cosmic Witches! Divine Gossip Girls here, your one and only source into the spiritual happenings of the cosmos.
Ever wonder what this month's energy will have in store for you? What the planets and stars are even up to? Or if the universe can just help you catch a break already?
Well, lucky you, because we have all the spiritual secrets to tell. Get ready to sip on your weekly dose of divine tea.
All right, so let's just jump right into it. And what do we want to talk about first? Ladies, I feel like there's so much that we could talk about, but maybe we'll just start more on like a base spiritual and self-development place before we get into the super
let's
stuff.
Let's start. I guess small, and then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. And I think
Maggie, you brought the conversation to the table, but let's just ease ourselves into it.
I feel like there's really dark and like woo-woo stuff we could talk about, but maybe something that we all have in common is I feel like we all started in different sections of like the coaching industry and the self-development industry. And whereas I hold a lot of obviously respect and love and a great space in my heart for that space because it's done so much for me, so much for my healing, for my spiritual growth, I think all of us, especially as of late, have kind of taken a step back from that world a little bit, from even like, I don't even have coach in my bio anymore. And it's just because I know I could make it what I want. And I see people who call themselves coaches who embody how I want to be as well. But I also see a lot of fear mongering, a lot of negativity, and a lot of like scamming being done in the coaching industry and almost like pyramid scheme kind of stuff. And that's just not my energy. That's not how I want to brand myself. So I thought we could kind of
it's like there's these coaches up like these bigger coaches who have obviously been in it for years and got in it right when all of this work was kind of like starting to boom. And it's like there's coaches under there and there's coaches under there, there's coaches under there, and it kind of makes you feel like you're just like this carbon copy of these bigger ones. Whereas you're more than just a coach, that we are starting to realize that actually we're not just carbon copies of these bigger coaches out there, where we're under these umbrellas and we're in this other kind of like self-made pyramid scheme. Like, we are our own healer. We're healers, we're practitioners, we're here for something more rather than just like a carbon copy coach from what others are doing. And that's kind of like how I was beginning to feel. It's like I don't want to just be another coach in this space. Like, how do you be another coach that's not just like a carbon copy? So that's where I feel like we were all beginning to be like, right, okay, like how can we create our own unique space in this industry?
And I think so many times I was pushed, like, you need to niche down. And I was really heavily pushed, like, you need to be a spiritual coach for other coaches. And I have coached a lot of people who also want to be coaches, but I've also helped people who have different businesses or people who are just in a like regular 9 to 5, which there's nothing wrong with. I think there's this big idea and this big message that it's like, if you were working in 9 to 5, you're not free. And it's like, that's not true. Some people want that consistency and they want freedom in other areas of their life. Some people find freedom within routine, within structure. I know, like, that's what my partner, he literally said this to me recently. He's like, I know you don't want a 9 to 5, but I do. I feel like having that routine and that structure will be so freeing to me, being able to be like, I get to just exist in this and then I get to do whatever I want with my spare time. He's like, that's what I want. And so there's almost, I don't know, this shaming and being like, you have to like make people coaches, or I've seen other coaches. I mean, we just, disclaimer here, we're not talking about anyone in particular. We're not trying to call people out. We're not trying to do this. We're just saying things we've noticed and like how we feel about it and why we want to do something different, because we want to change this space to be more empowering. I think we want to be part of that wave that brings light and love and all of that into it. And I've even seen people who call themselves business coaches, and they bring people in who have different businesses who aren't even coaches, and they say, you should be this kind of coach. And it's like, stop just turning people into coaches. Like, stop charging people $10,000 to turn them into a coach when that might not be what they want. And stop like just telling people like, it's this or you're not free. It's this or you'll never be happy. You'll never be a millionaire. You'll never have all of these things. And it's like, no, just the best way to be a coach. And this is how I've always been. I know you guys are the same. It's like finding what people actually truly desire rather than putting your desires onto other people.
And I think there is certain people that should maybe define themselves as coaches because that is more what they do. But I think when you're more on like the spiritual side of things, it's hard to necessarily say you're a coach, because with spirituality, it's going to be very fluid and dependent on the client. So you're not necessarily coaching them, you're kind of mentoring them. You're more of someone that guides them and leads them in whatever ways their spirit, their soul, their belief system needs. So I feel like it's hard because the coaching industry is, I mean, it includes everything. You can be a business coach, you can be a relationships coach, you can be a, memory coach. Like, there are certain things that I think using the title coach is so necessary for. But I think when it comes to more of the spiritual space, it's hard to necessarily utilize the word coach. And I don't think that that's like a bad thing that people do say coach. It's just that I think with more time, less people will use that when they're spiritual practitioners, because they'll realize that it's not as black and white as that. Like, you never really know what a client is going to need. So it's a hard territory. I mean, even the idea of a spiritual mentor is only beginning to become more and more, I guess, mainstream as more people are awakening and how spirituality is more accepted in more Western cultures and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a matter of time when like coaching and the term coaching maybe fizzles out of the spiritual space. But I mean, there's always dark within the light, and there's always, there's also people that claim to be like spiritual coaches or practitioners that aren't an embodiment of their work. And so instead of, allowing their personal knowledge to be what guides them and like their own experiences, they're just kind of spitting out what they've been taught. And I feel like, especially as a spiritual coach or practitioner, mentor, whatever you call yourself, it's really necessary for you to have experienced the things you teach about. So like for me, for example, whenever I share things with my clients, it's things that I have done. And I'm 100% aware that what I have done may not be what works for them. But I share it as a baseline of like, here's what I did. You want to start trying it out and then add your own touches? So it's really important as well to just be aware that there are so many people as the space grows that come from different backgrounds, and to do your background checks, background research, and really, utilize your intuition before working with someone, no matter what kind of thing you're doing with them.
Especially because there's so many scammers, like, who even try and impersonate people.
You've had that a lot.
I have people impersonate me like multiple times a month, and it's like, I was drawn to your energy. And like, will you like to have a reading for a donation? And it's like, no. Get to know your practitioners before you work with them. Research your practitioners and get to know how they speak, so that you don't get hurt in a space of like, you're vulnerable when it comes to your energy. You're vulnerable when you're in these spiritual spaces. So don't, allow someone to be like, I sense this negative energy around you. Like, send me a donation and I'll clear it, if you don't know who that is, because unfortunately, that's why spirituality can get a bad name, and like psychics and healers can get a bad name, because there's just scammers out there.
I'm glad you brought that up, Carly, because I've had that experience before where I have invested into a space and the coach wasn't as embodied and in integrity as they proclaimed to be on their social media. And it became more and more obvious while being in that space. And it really did, like, that's what kind of woke me up and made me realize, like, you have to have like an actual relationship. Like, please don't be investing into all of these different people and spaces and coaches because you think that's what's like, I don't know, like you just have that trust. You have to like build a better relationship and connection with them and know that they actually are embodied in their work, embodied in their marketing, embodied into what they are saying, and in integrity. Because I have experienced someone who has it, and I've invested thousands into this person, and realizing that actually, like, the way that they've been portraying themselves isn't actually what's been going on behind the scene. But and I understand that, yes, we're all humans as well, and even though we may be sharing like how to raise your vibration when we are obviously maybe feeling low as well, doesn't mean we're not embodied in our work. But when someone maybe like is sharing like business advice or whatever it is while while everything's like burning or whatever it is, kind of just being aware of the people that you're investing in and making sure that you do your background checks, or you can reach out to anyone that you know who's invested in them, and if they can give you a little bit of feedback and testimonial of that person, or maybe you just allow yourself to lean into their free resources if they have podcasts or if they have free workshops, and start to like feel into how they show up and the way that they express themselves, and just kind of like build that relationship before, especially if you're putting in thousands of pounds into a coach, because it can it might not just be embodied.
There's a book that I just started reading. I'm not very far into it, but it's called Cultish, and highly recommend it. It's so freaking good. But it's basically around the language that cults in the past have used to like bring people into their spaces. And it's saying how like a lot of advertising, a lot of like social media gurus, influencers also use the same sort of language to like draw people in, because that's how you advertise. You need to get people on board, right? Like it's very rare that you're just going to say, hey, I have this thing, and people are just going to flock to it and you're going to have a successful business. Like you have to sell. And that's the reality. There's nothing wrong with selling. But I think on the flip side, we're talking about like people not being embodied like in this space, but also as consumers and as people on our own spiritual journey. I think it's also important that we take some sort of responsibility for our own path and journey as well. Like we were saying, research people and make sure that you're not just purchasing sessions, you're not just purchasing coaching, you're not just purchasing programs, whatever, because of this FOMO that you have, or because you're looking for a magical fix to your solutions. Like I think so many of the time people come to me and they'll be like, teach me how to manifest millions of dollars. And I'm like, okay, but there's so much stuff that needs to happen below the surface first. And some people are like, yeah, I'm all in for it, let's go. And then some people just don't do the work, and then they're upset that it's not working because they weren't coming to heal, they were coming for a magic fix. And then what happens is you spend so much money because you're jumping from one magic fix to the next because you're just looking for that. And so many people online will promise you a formula, a magic fix, a step 1, 2, and 3, a practice you can do that will change everything, a challenge you can do that'll change everything. And some of them will, some of them won't. But at the same time, a lot of it, what it boils down to is how much energy you're willing to give it and how much you're willing to go through with it. But if you're always consuming, and you're not integrating, then it is going to feel like you never get your worth for your money. You are going to feel like everything's a scam. You are going to feel this way even when you're working with people who are fully embodied, who are deeply spiritual and in their light and are very powerful healers or practitioners. It might not feel that way for you if you're just looking for like that quick band-aid fix and you're not willing to like commit yourself to it. So it's not saying that you're wrong for not putting yourself fully into it, but maybe it's just doing an energy check, a little check with yourself before you purchase something, before you invest in something, and ask yourself, am I willing to fully commit to this, or am I just doing this to try and get a quick fix of something?
I 100% agree with that. And I love the idea of kind of checking in with what you are consuming and what you aren't like integrating yourself. I feel like for so much of the beginning of my spiritual kind of awakening, personal development journey, I was in the consuming stages. And I think a lot of us first need to learn things, right? And we learn things first from others. Usually it's like, oh, I recently started to listen to this podcast or this book. And I think that that is so powerful. But I want you to recognize, especially when you're on a spiritual journey, that most of that wisdom, once it's activated, comes from within. There's actually very little you need to consume to continue to grow on your spiritual journey once you have reached a level. And you'll know like when it's time to consume versus it's time to integrate, because if you're just consuming without integration, you'll start to get frustrated. You'll start to feel like, oh, like this doesn't feel so good anymore. Or, like I'm kind of bored of listening to these things. Maybe it's because you haven't actually done the work to integrate it. And also start to recognize, and I think this is something that we're going to move into the more and more that we enter into this age of Aquarius, is that less of the energy or the lessons or the wisdom that you gain is going to be outsourced. It's actually going to be internally sourced, but like from source. So I feel like more people are going to start to get downloads or be able to just connect to wisdom from a deep sense of knowing. So your power is going to be your intuition and your internal connection. And it's going to be less about giving your power away and more placing your power in your own hands instead of always looking to others for, you know, the quick fix or the whatever it is. I think working with practitioners, with coaches, with healers is crucial to support you in sometimes you do need to outsource. It's very helpful in terms of holding you accountable and sharing resources and sharing ways and kind of navigating you. Sometimes you cannot see the big picture when you're in the middle of it. So that's why a healer practitioner, a coach, all of us can be super helpful. But from time to time, you have to realize that the power of like change and creation and all of that comes from within you. It's not from the stuff you're consuming. And I had another point to kind of go along with that, but it's kind of on a different topic. So if anyone wants to talk about that, maybe
I love that you always go off on different tangents. But I love what you're saying because
Gemini and me.
I can't. Yeah, I have to ground these guys because we've got two Geminis here. I'm like, right, reel it back.
Says Miss Leo.
Anyway,
wait, what's your Mercury in, Sophie? Do you know?
I think it's Aquarius. I actually just looked at it the other day. I'll need to look at it again. Anyway,
Maggie, is yours in Gemini? I'm sorry.
See what I mean?
Mine's in Taurus. That's why I think
Oh.
I'm the one who I actually argue that I'll be like, all right, let's do this. Like, I'll get all out crazy, but I can be like, this is the plan.
But what I was going to say was, yeah, because I've experienced that, especially at the beginning of your journey where you are also like excited and you're like, for me personally, when I found the personal development world and the spirituality world, I was like, it's like a kid in a candy store. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I want it all, and that's kind of like me. I was like leaning into it and listening to all the podcasts and being a part of like programs and spaces like that did obviously really help me, but it gets to a point in your journey where I do believe that I was good at integrating, and I think it is important to make sure that you are doing the part as well. You're not just like thinking like attending these things is what's going to shift things. That you have to actually integrate and embody and take the action as well. But it did get to a point in my journey, I think after this experience with this other coach in this other space, where I realized like that wasn't fully embodied and I've just like went into debt with this space. So I had to like have a little reality check and take a little step back and come into my own self and hold myself for a little while, to instead of allowing others to keep holding me from a more like kind of disempowered state of like feeling the need for someone else to be the answer for me, and begin to like be my own rock as well, so that I could then outsource support from a more rooted and supported space within myself. Does that make sense? Instead of like constantly feeling like I had to seek outside myself or get another certification or like be in this space or like always have to have a coach. Like, yes, they supported me, but it got to a point in my own journey where I was like, right, okay, like I feel like to continue being able to open myself up to support in a more empowering space, I need to start leaning on myself a little bit more. I need to start trusting in myself a little bit more and creating more support within myself and trust within myself, so that when I do lean on more support outside of myself, they're in more alignment to me. And it's become valid because I am aligning with more aligned space holders and practitioners and mentors that are more like healthier for me, more aligned to me. So that's the kind of it. And again, it's like what Maggie said, that you have your own personal experience, and that's what my personal experience is. And just trust your own journey with things, but just be mindful of when you are over consuming and where that line is, to maybe take a step back and integrate and realign with the kind of support that you are opening yourself up to.
I also wanted to say something in terms of over consuming content on social media. That is such a big one, because I feel like we love consuming because it's that dopamine hit, right? It's like, ooh, like this feels good. Like, social media is addictive, right? They know what they were doing when they put all of these little videos back to back. Like it's addictive to like, ooh, give me more dopamine. And I think it's really powerful to recognize that when it comes to social media, that there also needs to be a line of, okay, I just consumed like TikTok videos for like 2 hours straight. It's time to integrate, or just like and come back home to myself, do some grounding. But in terms of like social media as well, I want you to become aware more often of what it is that you are consuming, especially when it comes to like spiritual content. So often, like you're randomly just scrolling and like watching different people talking about like twin flames or like those memes around like the universe hates me and it does this or something like that. And yeah, it can be funny and stuff, but it's also recognizing that like, how is that shaping your spiritual beliefs, and like how is that making you actually feel? Is it making you feel disempowered? Because a lot of times those like spiritual memes will kind of give your power away. It will be like, oh, this universe is like what's here throwing all these terrible things at me. It's the universe's fault, or like it's my angel guide's fault or something. Or they'll even, there's some people that go in and they share their opinions, and I want you to make sure that you are not just absorbing other people's spiritual views as facts when they're actually disempowering and they don't actually feel aligned. Like there is so much information about twin flames that I think is quite toxic. Like I think so many people are going out talking about twin flames and like blah 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 blah. There's this, there's that. And like once again, who is making this information? Like what, from where are they getting it? Like I get it, it's maybe their experience, but like it's not factual. Like because one person said it doesn't mean that's factual. And I don't want people's views of spirituality, and I think that's a bit unfortunate, people's views of spirituality are being skewed by those that aren't actually embodying like spirituality and like a divine connection state, but rather like the ego, and they're kind of just creating these beliefs that are instilling more fear into people, which is not what spirituality is supposed to be. It's supposed to be this divine connection that makes you feel that love. But I think it's very like it's integral to recognize that if you're a spiritual person, but you kind of are being like have an aversion to spirituality all of a sudden after like being in these spiritual spaces online, and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's most likely because you are following people, or you are like consuming content, or you are in spaces that aren't actually empowering you in a spiritual sense. They're kind of disempowering you, or maybe someone's feeding you things that doesn't feel good, and you don't have to do that. Like don't allow that one mentor that or that one person or those random videos you see completely shift the way you view spirituality and say, oh, this is a toxic space, because that's not what spirituality is. Like it's not this cult, it's not this thing. It literally like take away the humans and just look at it as this loving divine source energy. So why the hell do we have to see it as like a rule book, or it needs to look this certain way or be this certain way?
I totally agree. There's so much fear mongering, I think, done online in spiritual spaces where they're like, you need to meet your twin flame or you'll never have as filling of a relationship, which I think could be a whole other episode. Let us know. Maybe we found out that the Spotify thing was turned off. I'm going to try and figure out how to get it to turn on, and I'll remember because I'm editing this episode. So I'll put it in as a Q&A or a little poll at the bottom if you'd be interested in hearing our thoughts on twin flames, and like maybe it kind of like
Maggie's like, let us know your thoughts, but actually we're going to be doing it because I want to do it.
Because I have so much to say on this. I mean, I have a whole podcast episode on it my own, but I was thinking like we could talk about twin flames, and maybe the three of us could also watch the twin flames like Netflix documentary about like the cult around twin flames and like talk about that and like our thoughts on it. That could be, I think, really, really interesting. But I just think that people love to grab you with fear when they're not working from a place of light, when they are trying to fear monger, because if they can cause you to be fearful that maybe something is wrong, maybe something is affecting you, maybe something is, going to hurt you, then you are more likely to be like grabbed. It's like they hook you with that, which they always say, like, you need to hook people at the beginning of the videos. And what's going to hook you more? Like ways to raise your energy, or something like horrible could be affecting your energy. Like you're going to be like, oh, what's affecting my energy, right? And so people use this fear mongering. Like I even saw a TikTok recently being like, reincarnation is devil's work. When you die and you see a light, don't go into the light because that's evil forces pretending to be your loved one so that you come back to Earth, and then they'll feed on your pain and suffering, because these dark entities feed on human pain and suffering. And if you agree to come back with your past loved ones, in quotation marks, that's just them like feeding themselves. And I was like, what a load of crap. Like, what? That's such fear mongering of, you need to follow my way of doing things even after you die and leave this human form, because otherwise you're in danger and you're in trouble. And it's like, that's just not how we want to be operating. We don't want to be acting out of a place of fear or scarcity or any of those things, because it's just not healthy. It's just not going to help you. And at the end of the day, I've said this so many times, but like, if all my spiritual beliefs are a huge placebo effect and I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, then that's fine, because it's genuinely improving my life and allowing me to feel better. And at the end of the day, that's what this should be about, is that you feel better, that you feel more healed, and you feel whole. Do either of you want to throw something in there real quick before we wrap up the episode?
I feel like to come back round to the beginning, but first we got to make, I think we need to make an episode about the placebo effect of spirituality.
Yeah.
That could be quite fun as well, because this could be a whole placebo effect. But I mean, if it's working for you and it's bringing you joy and it's bringing you life, then I mean, like, let's keep leaning into it. But to bring it kind of right round to wrap up the episode, what you were saying about like coming from that place of fear, it's like that's something else that I kind of began to notice in the coaching space as well. It's like people like marketing with these pain points, like hooking people in with like the pain, with the fear of things, and I just like didn't feel good in my body. And it's like, that's not how I really want to be building a heart-centered business, from a place of bringing people in and their fear as well, and instead like speaking to my people from a place of love, from a place of expansion, from a place of light, and that's something that I began to notice that I just didn't really vibe with in this coaching space, is like being so heavy in the pain, being so heavy in the fear. And like, yes, like I take all my clients through that heaviness, through the fear, so that we can process that and we can heal that and we can really liberate that. But to be so heavy in it within the way that you speak to your people through your marketing, through how you show up online, it just like, that was something that I just didn't want to really become such a heavy part of.
Just recognizing that there is no right, no wrong, but there is like what you feel is valid. And if there's people that you follow or spaces that you're in that are creating resistance or fear or just not helping you feel good, you can get out. You don't have to listen to it. Just because it's their truth doesn't need to mean it's yours. And yeah, the truth is your beliefs create your reality, and the people you put in your space also feed your vibrations. So whatever it is that you are in that is not serving you, that does not feel good, it's probably because it's not aligned and it's time to make some switches. So there's no right or wrong, but this is just us sharing our experiences and what we've recognized in terms of what doesn't feel good and how we've kind of started to shift out of it. And that's why we create spaces like this, where we hope you guys feel empowered spiritually, and you feel empowered to also always take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. None of us are here speaking facts. We are speaking our truth, and our truth is always changing too as we evolve and grow. And that's the whole point of being a human, is just like having this experience where you keep leaning into what feels good, and what feels good one day may not feel good in a month, in a week, and that's okay. So just listen to yourself, trust yourself, and if something doesn't feel right, get out and find different. There doesn't feel good, that means there's something that's more aligned with you. So
and permission to be wrong, and permission to change your mind and grow. And if you made a mistake in the past and you believe something that was wrong in the past, that's okay. You can just grow from it. And you can, if you're like, oh, that was a bad belief that I had, just, that's okay. We can move forwards.
I've had like, okay, after this we'll wrap it up, but I had this moment this past year where like you can literally believe yourself into anything, and I believed myself for so long into ill health, and this year I realized I didn't want to be sick anymore, so I started to change my beliefs. It's not like you have to sit there and be like, oh, I'm a terrible person for believing this or for doing this. Like, no, it's just you live and you learn. You literally live and learn. So all right. Well, we're going to wrap up the podcast there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please leave a review. Please send this episode to someone that may enjoy or may benefit from hearing this conversation. As always, we are so grateful for all of you, for all your support. So sending lots of love, lots of good energy, and we will chat with you in our next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.